Hi, this is Dr. Frank Ciappatini with the Church of Rational Truth. First, like always, we're going to start off with some old business. We had voting happen this week. The votes are in, and the $36.94 of passive income that came in during last month from our endowment is going to go towards funding the physical church and library. So that one's up to about $150-ish right now. Still really low, still need to get it up quite a bit before we can start looking at spaces or potentially buying something, but slow and steady we'll start growing it. Today we're going to talk about the separation of religion and science and whether that actually should exist. For us as a church, we believe very strongly there shouldn't be that separation. In fact, our whole church is founded on the fact that we act scientifically, we act rationally, we try to find truth. There is a lot of worry in the religious community or certain religions that are very anti-science or very against people using science to challenge their beliefs or to try and say that their beliefs are false. And there's a problem with that. If your beliefs are true, if you believe in your beliefs and you think that they are real and that they exist, you shouldn't have a fear of that. You shouldn't be worried about someone digging into your religion or your belief or your faith and trying to use science to prove it wrong. Because if your belief is true, if your belief is real, if reality is based on that assumption, belief, that faith, you should not be able to disprove it with science because science doesn't care, or at least science that's done properly shouldn't care. Science is all about using logic, reasoning to determine truth, to try and see what is real, what isn't, what can be proven, what cannot be proven, and how much evidence is behind something. Good science is not biased. Good science does not care one way or another. Good science is not trying to prove a specific thing. If you are a good non-biased scientist, you don't go out trying to prove something necessarily in terms of your bias. If you're a good scientist, you try to say, hey, this is a possibility. Let's try and look at the evidence. Let's try and challenge it. Let's try and disprove it and then see what the evidence says. You have to be based on the evidence and I hate using the science behind it, but that's the point. You're trying to not introduce your own bias. You're trying not to prove something that you believe in. You're just trying to prove if something is real or is not real. And that is what a good scientist does. That is not to say that there are lots of bad scientists out there who have a political agenda. That's not to say that there's not a lot of people who make biased studies or who do not make an active attempt at trying to remove that bias from attempting to analyze things and prove something, whether it's true or not. But if someone is trying to really practice science, is really trying to seek truth, they should not bring that internal bias. And eventually, usually the goal of scientific thought and reasoning is that enough people study, enough people challenge, enough people do experiments, you will be able to generally get closer and closer to the truth. You might not ever actually get to the exact truth, but you can at least start weeding out things that are not correct based on the preponderance of the evidence. So if you do have faith, if you have a certain belief, or if you have a religion, that religion really shouldn't be afraid of science. If that religion is true, if you actually believe that your God has this power, if you believe that your philosophy is factually correct, you should have no fear. You should embrace science and say, yeah, science, come on in, look at all this, challenge it, try it. You'll see it's true. You'll see that my beliefs are right. That is what our church is based on. Our church is based on the kind of almost if you flip it, the opposite. Instead of saying these are our beliefs, science prove it right, we kind of go the opposite. Science, prove what our beliefs should be. Let's use science to see what we should believe in. If we can use it, we can say, hey, is there a God? What happens in the afterlife? You can actually use science that way to prove and disprove certain things. That is how our church is kind of different, or why our church is very, I would say, inclusive. Because we basically just believe in what can be proven. If we can get evidence one way or another, that is what we follow. We don't follow things blindly. We don't follow things based on faith, because faith is the lack of evidence. Faith is the opposite of science. Faith just blindly follows something just because someone has said it or there is a statement. It doesn't challenge. It's not based on any kind of factual evidence. Versus for us, we want factual evidence. We want to say, hey, what actually leads me to believe this, or what actually backs this up to make this belief true, or what evidence does it have for or against it. So I would say there should not be this big divide, or this big separation where science does not approach religion and religion doesn't approach science. We've done this to not butt heads. It's because people think that they're incompatible, that you can't both be scientific and you can't be religious. Like, there's this dichotomy that you can't have your cake and eat it too. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I would say the only reason you have that is because you don't want to start a fuss or a fight, or you don't want to challenge somebody. And I agree, you don't want to be some jerk. You don't want to go and try and force your beliefs. Or if you think someone is wrong and you have the preponderance of the evidence, you don't want to force it down someone else's throat. And I think that in today's culture is what happens on both sides. People who are religious take their religious doctrine and try and shove it down science's throat. Science, who has a specific doctrine, or certain scientists, I should say, not science in general, they have the same thing where they can see the factual errors in certain people's religious beliefs, and both sides are trying to shove their own beliefs down each other's throats, trying to say, you are absolutely wrong, come on to my side of the table. The other side is, no, 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 I'm not going to do that, I'm going to stay on my side. And then there becomes this gap of, oh, we can't challenge each other. Instead, it should be embracing one another. It should be, hey, science, come over here. Tell me more about my religion. What can you prove and disprove with it? Hey, science, don't be afraid of looking at these things that might be controversial, that might be scary. There have been some studies on prayer. I think there should be more. There should be more studies on religious beliefs, miracles, things that do happen. Not because those things are necessarily true, but you should be able to embrace science into religious thought. You should be able to go back and have scientists review religious texts, review historical things, say, what actual evidence is there? Can we corroborate the story? What do we actually believe is true from these things? And people who are religious, you should embrace that. If your beliefs are true and you think that is what is actually reality, you should embrace science. You should become a scientist. You should look at things rationally. You should try to understand them, and you should challenge them. You should try to find the flaws in your own beliefs. You should pick them apart. And you should say, okay, what can I actually physically disprove here? That might not be actually true. Try and see it scientifically and rationally. And then that way you can get closer to your own truth. You can get closer to your own God. You can get closer to your own beliefs, because now you've actually weeded out what is true and what is not true. Both science and religion have aspects that are true and false. And I think everybody should have to accept this. No religious doctrine is 100% correct about everything, because everything is seen through the eyes of man. The Bible is written by man through God's word. Most religious texts are written by man, inspired by God. Even if you argue it is the literal voice of God, man still translates, man copies, man changes. You're going to have flaws in there. You're going to have errors. It is not completely 100% infallible. Even if you literally interpret your religious texts, you can't say that there is not some possibility of slight error or mistranslation or misunderstanding or misinterpretation. In fact, many religious leaders are just ingrained in trying to discriminate the slight differences or the subtle differences. That's why you see different religious sects who still believe in the same holy book but have splintering divides on things, because there's incongruities, or things are not crystal clear in terms of what certain things mean. Science is also the same way. Science has very many similarities where you are not 100% sure about theories, evidence, what is true, what is not true. They constantly have to polish that gem. They constantly have to go through and say, okay, what is accurate about this theory, what isn't. The big difference is many religious people are not willing to do that. They are just, this is my belief. I'm ingrained into it. Science is a little bit more flexible, but then again, you still see those people who are so ingrained in a specific belief or pattern that they won't change it or they won't challenge it. And that, ironically, is unscientific. They need to be able to challenge their own beliefs. So both sides should be able to say, do you know what? Yeah, we might be wrong about certain aspects. Even scientists who use scientists might be wrong about certain aspects. But we both need to kind of drop things, become a little bit more humble, and just say, hey, we don't know everything. No one does. No one for a fact has 100% down, whether you're the best scientist in the world, the best religious scholar in the world, the Pope. You don't know everything. You've got to admit that you don't know everything. You can learn from someone else's side. And then I would say embrace scientific thought and rationality, regardless of what your beliefs are. because then you can get towards truth. And I think both sides, both religious sides and scientific sides, will both agree that everybody wants the truth. No one wants to purposefully pursue a lie. They don't want to indoctrinate other people with a lie. People are indoctrinating others because they think it is the truth. So I would say both sides should agree, hey, we both care about the truth. That is something we have in common. Let's embrace that and work together to find what is true. That is, I would say, all I have to say about that for now. I could probably go on for a very, very long time about rationality and religion, but I think there should not be this separation. There should not be this feeling that we can't touch one another. We should embrace. We should. This is getting oddly sexual, this talk. We should be able to cross that line. Let's use that. That's a little less sexual. And work with each other rather than work against each other or pretend that these are two completely different spheres. I think they should come together. They should work together. And by doing that, we can further ourselves as a society, as a people, and we can get closer to understanding universal truth. This is it for today. Thank you all for anyone who's watched. This is Dr. Frank Chopatini with the Church of Rational Truth. We will be back next week with another lecture. If you have any comments, please leave them below. And thank you again. Bye-bye.